Then the pounding started before the widow was asleep. She froze in her chair, hands gripping the armrests. No one ever came this late. The knocks didn't pause. They grew harder, rattling the thin frame of the door. She rose slow, her breath sharp, the floor creaking beneath her weight. She opened the door an inch. 3 faces stared back at her, pale in the lantern light spilling from behind her shoulder. Children, but not the kind that looked like children anymore. Mud crusted on their skin, eyes that carried something broken. The oldest girl spoke first. Her voice cracked, but carried steel. "Food, or we take it." The widow blinked at them. "You threatening me?" The girl didn't blink. "You got bread. We can smell it." The boy stepped forward, no more than 10, but his jaw tight as any man's. "We ain't beggars. We'll take if you don't give." The smallest, a girl with hair tangled over her face, said nothing. She only stared at the widow's hands, watching them shake. The widow looked down at them, the night pressing heavy behind their shoulders. No coat, no shoes worth keeping feet warm. Something about the smallest girl's silence sank into her chest. She pushed the door wide enough to let them in. "Don't make me regret it." The oldest girl's shoulders dropped, but she didn't thank her. She walked inside like she owned the floor. The boy followed, dragging mud across the boards. The little one stepped last, her eyes never leaving the widow's face. The widow set the lantern on the table. "Sit. Don't touch nothing else." The girl smirked, sliding into a chair. "We only came for food. You can keep your ghosts." The widow's head snapped toward her. "What ghosts you think I got?" The boy answered, sharp. "Every house got 'em." The widow's lips pressed tight. She pulled bread from the cupboard, set it on the table, then filled 3 tin cups with water from the jug. The children fell on the bread like wolves, tearing chunks, crumbs scattering across the cloth. The widow leaned on the counter, arms crossed. "Where's your folks?" The girl chewed and spat her answer between bites. "Gone." "Gone where?" The boy glared. "Ain't your business." The widow's voice dropped. "I asked." The girl slammed her hand on the table. "We don't got none. That good enough?" The room went still. The youngest girl kept eating, tiny hands gripping bread, as if it would vanish if she let go. The widow's gaze stayed on the oldest. "Don't talk to me like that." "Not in my house." "You gonna throw us out then?" The girl shot back. The widow let the silence stretch, the air between them tight. She shook her head once. "No." The boy wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Why not?" "Because I know what hunger feels like," the widow said. Her words came flat, no softness. "And I know what it makes you do." The girl studied her, suspicion flickering behind her eyes. She took another bite, slower this time. The youngest finished her piece, then whispered for the first time, "Thank you." The widow's throat caught. She didn't answer. She just cut another slice and set it in front of the child. The boy pushed his cup forward. "More water." "You ask polite," the widow said. The boy narrowed his eyes. "Please." She poured, steady, and set it down. He grabbed it quick, gulping loud. The widow moved back to her chair, sitting across from them. Her eyes stayed fixed. "You said you'd take it if I didn't give. You mean that?" The girl looked at her straight. "Yeah." "You think you'd win?" "We ain't scared," the girl said. The widow's mouth curved, almost a smile, but not quite. "Then you're fools." The boy slammed the cup down. "We ain't fools. Hungry makes you fools," she said. "And tired, and mean." The girl's jaw clenched. But she didn't argue. The widow leaned forward. "You came knocking like wolves, but you're still children. You remember that in this house." The little one whispered again, "We remember." The girl turned on her. "Shut it." The widow's eyes cut sharp. "Don't hush her, not in front of me." The girl leaned back, folding her arms. "Fine." The room settled, the lantern's flame flickering shadows on the wall. The bread was nearly gone. The jug sat half empty. The widow looked at their hands, scarred, scraped, too thin. She sighed. "You'll sleep here tonight." The boy frowned. "On the floor." "Better than dirt," the widow said. The girl stared hard at her. "Why are you letting us?" The widow's eyes dropped to her lap. "Because once I wanted someone to let me." No one spoke after that. The children chewed slower, quieter. The little one curled into the chair, her eyelids heavy. The widow rose, brought out a folded quilt, laid it on the floor near the stove. "There, keep warm." The boy grabbed it first, spreading it out. The youngest slid down from her chair, crawling onto it without a word. The girl sat on the edge, still watching the widow. "You ain't scared of us?" the girl asked. The widow shook her head. "Not yet." The girl's lips pressed into a thin line. She leaned down, whispering to her brother. He nodded once, eyes sharp. The widow caught it, but said nothing. She walked back to her chair, sat, and stared at the door still cracked from when she opened it. The night outside waited, silent. But she knew it hadn't gone. The last sound before sleep was the small voice under the quilt, whispering one word again. "Thank you." The widow closed her eyes, but her hand stayed on the armrest, ready. Morning light never softened the house. It pressed in sharp through the cracks, showing dust that never left. The widow set the pot on the table. Steam rose, thin and sour. The children sat waiting, restless, eyes darting as if the meal might vanish before reaching them. She ladled broth into bowls. The smell of onions and bone filled the air. The boy snatched his first, tilting it to his lips, spilling across his shirt. The girl reached with both hands, slurping fast, her chin slick with grease. The youngest tried to keep up, tearing bread with fingers too small, soaking it until it crumbled between her fists. The widow sat opposite, hands folded, not eating. "Slow down." The boy didn't stop. "We don't slow." "You choke if you keep at it," she said. "Better choke than starve," the girl shot back. The widow's eyes narrowed. "Don't mouth me in my house." The girl met her gaze, chewing loud. "We ain't your house. We ain't your burden." The widow leaned back, steady. "Good. Then don't call me your mama." The words dropped heavy. The little one paused, spoon hovering, eyes wide. Silence stretched, broken only by the slurp of broth spilling over the boy's mouth. The girl smirked, though her hands shook on the bowl. "Didn't plan on it." The widow's voice cut low. "Then we're clear." The boy slammed his spoon down. "Why you feed us, then?" "Because you knocked," she said. "That all?" "That's all." The girl scoffed. "No one feeds for nothing." The widow stood, walked to the counter, poured herself water. "Then maybe I'm no one." The children's chewing filled the room again. Every bite sounded like defiance. Crumbs scattered across the tablecloth, broth staining deep. The widow watched without a word, her jaw tight. The boy finally dropped his spoon, leaning back. "Better than scraps." "You talk like dogs," the widow said. He wiped his mouth with his sleeve. "Dogs don't thank." The youngest lifted her eyes. "Thank you." The boy shoved her shoulder. "Stop saying that." The widow's tone snapped sharp. "Let her speak." The girl pushed her bowl aside, half empty. "She don't know better. She knows more than you," the widow said. The girl's lips curled. You think you scare me? The widow walked to her side, close enough to touch, but didn't. No, you think you scare me. The girl's breath caught, just for a moment, before she leaned back. Maybe I do. The boy laughed, short and dry. She don't scare easy. The youngest laid her head on the table, eyelids heavy. She clutched the bread in her fist, half soaked, half crumbled. The widow saw her sag and shook her head. She's done, the girl muttered. She always sleeps first. Because she's tired, the widow said. She's weak, the boy countered. She's alive, the widow snapped. And that's more than you understand. The boy stiffened. We understand plenty. You understand hunger, she said. That ain't the same. The girl leaned forward, elbows on the table. You talk like you know. I do. Prove it. The widow stared at her, eyes hard. Not to you. The girl sat back, silent for once. The room held the weight of it, broth cooling in bowls, breadcrumbs scattered like bones. The youngest stirred in her sleep, a small breath escaping. The boy's voice broke the quiet. We won't stay long. The widow looked at him. You'll stay till I say. We ain't your prisoners? No, she said. You're not. Then we leave when we want. She shook her head. Not tonight. The girl's eyes narrowed. You think you own us? I think I gave you food. And we took it, the girl snapped. The widow bent closer, voice sharp as steel. No, I let you. The words froze the room. Even the boy didn't answer. The youngest shifted, letting go of the bread at last. It fell to the table with a soft thud. The widow straightened, pulled the pot back to the counter. Eat or don't, I don't care, but you stay quiet while she sleeps. The girl whispered, low but bitter. You talk like you care. The widow didn't turn. And you talk like you want me to. No one replied. Only the sound of the smallest child breathing against the wood filled the silence. The widow moved back to her chair, folding her arms. She stared at the three of them, two awake, one drifting, her face unreadable. The boy tapped the table with his fingers, restless. Tomorrow we'll go. The widow's answer came calm, final. Tomorrow comes when I open the door. The girl's mouth twisted, but she didn't push further. She only glanced at her sister asleep on the table, then back at the widow. Their eyes locked, two wills that refused to break. The night before had begun with pounding fists. Now the day stretched before them, the air thick with words sharp enough to cut. But no one left the table. The widow watched the youngest breathe deep and slow, then looked at the others, still burning with fight. She said nothing more. She didn't need to. The first light of morning barely touched the yard when the children slipped out. The boards of the porch groaned under their small weight. They moved quick, barefoot, silent as shadows. The widow watched from her chair by the window, eyes narrowed, waiting until the last of them vanished toward the barn. Then she rose. The barn loomed like it always had, old wood leaning, roof sagging, doors scarred with time. The children pressed against it, listening. The girl whispered, "It talks at night. You heard it too." The boy nodded. "Walls breathe. I swear it." The little one clutched her arm. "I don't like it." "Scared?" the boy asked. "Not scared," she said. "I just don't like it." The widow came up behind them. "Open it then." They jumped, spinning around. The oldest glared. "You spying?" "I'm watching," the widow said. "Big difference." The boy stepped forward, pulling at the heavy latch. It gave with a long scrape. The door creaked wide, the smell of dust and hay pouring out. Light fell in, thin beams cutting through the gloom. Inside, the air was still, yet a rope swung from the rafters, moving slow, side to side. No breeze stirred the dust, no draft touched the boards. Still it swayed, steady, deliberate. The little one grabbed the widow's skirt. See? It moves. The boy's voice dropped low. Somebody left him here. The girl's eyes darted to the widow. Who? The widow's jaw clenched. Don't ask. You know. The girl pressed. Don't. The rope swayed harder, as if the barn itself had heard. The boy whispered, He hung here, didn't he? The widow reached forward, slammed the door shut. The echo rattled the walls, cutting off the light. They stood in the dim, the rope still swinging above. The girl's words sliced through the dark. You ain't denying it. The widow's breath came rough. Not everything's yours to know. The boy stepped closer, fists clenched. We got a right. You got nothing, she snapped. The girl shot back. We got eyes. We got ears. We know when someone lies. The widow's voice dropped low, sharper than before. Then know this, I don't lie. I just don't speak. The little one whispered, almost a whimper. Let's go. The girl shook her head. Not till she tells. The rope creaked again, wood above straining as if weight still pulled it. The boy stared upward, face pale. It's him, ain't it? The widow's hand shot out, gripping his shoulder. Enough. He jerked away. Why you hiding? Her voice broke, just for a moment. Because some things don't leave when you speak them. The girl folded her arms. You protecting him, or yourself? The widow's silence answered louder than words. The boy spat on the dirt. Then you're no better than him. The little one whimpered. Stop. The widow turned on him, eyes blazing. Careful how you talk in my house. This ain't your house, he shouted. Not if it keeps ghosts. The rope above slowed, finally still, hanging limp like nothing ever moved it. The barn held the silence, heavy, waiting. The widow opened the door again, sunlight rushing in. She stepped aside, voice flat. Out! The children hesitated, then the girl marched past her, dragging the little one by the arm. The boy lingered, staring at the rope, lips trembling, though his jaw stayed set. Finally, he stalked out. The widow stayed last, closing the door tight behind her. She stood staring at the wood, breathing hard. The girl spun on her. You'll tell us one day. No, the widow said. I won't. You will, the boy muttered. The widow turned toward the house, her shadow long in the morning light. Then wait forever. The children trailed after, muttering, glancing back at the barn that seemed still alive behind them. The youngest kept her head low, whispering to herself, I don't like it. I don't like it. The widow walked on, not looking back. She knew the rope would still sway in their minds long after it stopped in the barn. The dogs barked first, then the sound of hooves. The widow stepped onto the porch, eyes narrowing against the glare of late morning. Dust rose at the edge of her land where a horse slowed, heavy boots swinging down. The sheriff walked forward, hat low, badge glinting like a blade in the sun. He stopped at the fence, resting one hand on the top rail. His other touched the badge, casual, as if to remind her who he was. Got word of strays, he said. Young ones, mean ones. Folks say they headed this way. The widow's voice cut short. You calling me a liar already? I'm asking polite, he said. Don't turn it to something else. She folded her arms, leaning on the post. Polite's not knocking on a widow's door with a badge flashing. His smile was thin, nothing warm. Badge makes questions easier. Her jaw tightened. A badge don't make you right. He leaned closer, voice dropping low. It makes me enough. From the barn, the children crouched at the gap in the wood, eyes fixed. The boy whispered, "He knows." The girl hushed him. "Quiet." The widow caught the flicker of movement by the barn. She didn't turn her head. She held the sheriff's stare. "I run my house clean. Ain't your concern who passes my fence. Everything inside my county's my concern," he said. "This land don't belong to your county," she answered. He chuckled once, dry. "Land don't care what you think. Paper says otherwise." The widow's hand tightened on the rail. "Paper don't feed me. Paper don't bury the dead." "Maybe not," the sheriff said, "but it tells me what's mine." The boy's whisper cracked through the barn wood. "He's lying." The girl pinched his arm. "Shut it." The sheriff tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "Funny thing," he said, slow. "Folks saw prints down by the creek, small ones. Didn't look like yours." The widow kept her face still. "Creek washes all sorts through." "These were fresh," he pressed. "Mud still wet." "Then maybe you followed wrong," she said. The sheriff's gaze sharpened. "Or maybe you're hiding." The widow's voice rose, sharp as a whip. "Maybe you're wasting time." For a long moment, neither moved. The badge caught the light again, blinding bright between them. Finally he leaned back, fingers drumming on the rail. "You always had a tongue too sharp for your own good, and you always had ears too soft for truth," she snapped. He laughed once, hollow. "Careful. Sharp tongues cut the ones holding them." Her eyes burned into his. "Then let me bleed." The sheriff studied her, jaw tight. Then he turned, glancing at the barn, though his gaze didn't linger. "Barn's leaning worse every year," he said. "Still stands," she replied. "Not forever," he said, swinging back toward his horse. "Nothing does." The children pressed harder to the wood, hearts pounding. The boy whispered, "He saw us." The girl hissed, "No, he just wanted her scared." The sheriff mounted slow, the leather creaking. He looked back once, eyes fixed on the widow. "Keep clean now. Strays don't stay strays long." The widow's voice came steady. "Neither do thieves with badges." He tipped his hat, nothing kind in the gesture, and turned the horse. Dust rose again, swallowing his shape as he rode back down the road. The widow stood at the fence until the sound faded. Then she walked back, slow, not looking at the barn, not looking at the children hiding there. Inside the barn, the little one whispered, "He'll come back." The boy nodded. "Next time, he won't ask." The girl clenched her fists, whispering fierce, "Then we don't answer." The widow paused on the porch steps, her shadow long against the boards. She had heard them even from across the yard. Her voice came low, almost to herself. "Not answering won't be enough." The barn creaked. The children pressed tight together, and the house behind her seemed to hold its breath. The knock didn't wait for an answer. The door swung wide, wood cracking against the wall. Boots pounded the floor. 3 deputies shoved their way inside, rifles slung, eyes hard. The widow stood at the table, stiff as stone. The children froze near the hearth. The lead deputy sneered, "Sheriff says you're hiding strays." The widow's voice came flat. "Sheriff's wrong." The second deputy glanced at the children. Funny-looking shadows for a quiet house. The girl stepped forward before the widow could stop her. "We ain't shadows." The widow shoved her back with one arm, keeping her close. "Stay behind me." The lead deputy leaned across the table. "Move aside, ma'am. We'll look for ourselves." "You'll do nothing of the sort," she snapped. He reached for her arm. She slapped his hand away. The boy gasped. The widow's voice rose sharper. Touch me again, and you'll lose it." The room tightened. The deputies shifted, boots grinding against the boards. One grabbed the edge of the table, yanking it aside. Bowls clattered, broth spilling across the cloth. The girl screamed, lunging forward. The widow caught her, but not before the deputy shoved back. The child's elbow struck a tin cup. It flew, struck the lead deputy in the chin. His lip split, blood dripping down his shirt. The room exploded. The deputy roared, swinging his hand across the table. The widow pushed the children behind her, her back braced against their small bodies. The boy shouted, "Stop it!" But no one listened. The second deputy laughed, harsh. "Wild little beasts." The girl spat at him, her voice fierce. "We ain't scared." The widow's chest rose, breath hard. Her voice thundered at last, stronger than the walls around them. "But you should be." The words cut the room still. Even the deputies froze, staring at her like they hadn't heard her speak loud before. The lead deputy wiped his bloody lip, eyes narrow. "Careful, widow." Her stare didn't waver. "Get out of my house." The third deputy stepped forward, rifle shifting. "Sheriff don't take kindly to refusals." "Sheriff don't take kindly to truth either," she fired back. The boy clutched her dress, whispering, "Don't." But she didn't stop. "You come in here like wolves. You break bread and turn it to blood. This table held your father's once, and now it holds your shame." The lead deputy's jaw clenched. "You think words scare us?" "No," she said. "I think ghosts do." The room seemed to breathe with her words. The children pressed tighter against her, eyes wide. The second deputy looked at the blood dripping onto the tablecloth, red spreading across the faded flowers stitched there. He shifted uneasy, muttering, "Let's go." The lead deputy glared at him, then back at the widow. He spat onto the floor, the sound sharp. "This ain't finished." "Then leave it unfinished," she said. The third deputy pulled at his sleeve. "Come on." They backed toward the door, not turning their backs until they stepped outside. Boots hit the porch, then the yard. Horses snorted, restless. The men mounted fast, dust rising behind them. Inside silence returned heavy. The widow stood still, chest heaving. Blood still dripped, darkening the tablecloth. The children clung to her, their breaths ragged. The girl whispered, voice trembling but proud, "We ain't scared." The widow looked down at her, eyes fierce. "Good, hold on to that." The boy's voice broke. "But they'll come back." "Yes," the widow said, "they will." The little one buried her face against her skirt. "Then what?" The widow lifted her chin, staring at the bloodstains spreading slow. Her voice came low, steady, final. "Then we show them what fear feels like." The children said nothing more. Their small hands gripped her tighter. The lantern flickered, shadows climbing the wall, and the table stood between them, bread gone, bowls empty, and blood seeping deep into cloth that would never wash clean. The night carried no wind, only the hum of insects in the grass. The widow lit a lantern, the flame throwing a thin circle of gold across the yard. The children followed close, eyes wide, bare feet whispering against dirt. The well stood waiting, its stones black with age. The widow set down the lantern, picked up the shovel, leaning against the fence. "We dig here." The boy frowned. "Why?" Her answer came short. "Because it's time." The girl crossed her arms. "Time for what?" The widow drove the shovel into the dirt. The sound cracked through the night. She didn't answer. The children crouched close, whispering. The little one clutched her sister's sleeve. "I don't like it." "Don't matter," the girl muttered. "She's making us." The boy grabbed another shovel left against the stones. "Then we help." He stabbed the ground, pulling up clumps of damp earth. The smell of rot rose sharp. He coughed, but kept digging. The widow's strikes came steady, hard, each one biting deeper into the ground. The girl finally joined, scraping at the edge with her hands. What are we even looking for? The widow didn't pause. What was left? The boy froze. Left by who? She ignored him, shovel striking stone beneath the soil. Sparks flared, dying fast. Her breath grew harsh, but she never slowed. The girl pulled back, dirt caking her nails. You hiding something down here? The widow's silence answered louder than words. The boy dug faster, frantic, until his fingers hit something solid. He pulled it free, wiping mud with his sleeve. A small tin badge glinted in the lantern light, rust eating its edges. He held it up high. Told you, somebody's here. The little one whimpered, backing away. Don't touch it. The boy shoved it toward the widow. This yours? She stared at it, face unreadable. The girl stepped closer, eyes narrow. Was it him? The widow's grip tightened on the shovel. She didn't answer. Tell us, the boy demanded. Her shovel came down hard, striking stone with a crack that echoed into the dark. The lantern flame shuddered with the vibration. The children fell silent. Only the sound of her breathing filled the night. The girl whispered, voice sharp. It was him, I know it. The widow leaned on the shovel, sweat streaking her face. Some truths rot deeper than the well. The boy clenched the badge tight in his hand. Then you already knew. Her eyes flashed. I always knew. The little one's voice cracked. What did he do? The widow looked at her, then turned away. Enough. The boy stepped forward, fist trembling with the badge inside. We got a right to know. No, she snapped. You got a choice. Dig or walk. The children stared at her, torn between fear and fury. Finally, the boy dropped to his knees, clawing dirt again. The girl followed, jaw set. The little one sank down, too, though tears streaked her cheeks. The widow watched them dig. Her shadow stretched long across the ground. The hole widened, deeper with each strike. The earth gave up stones, bones of roots, scraps of rotted wood. Nothing else. At last the widow raised a hand. Stop! The children froze, breathing hard. Dirt streaked their faces. The boy still held the badge, fingers cut from its rusted edge. The widow took it from him, held it to the lantern. The letters were faint, but the shape remained. A sheriff's star, bent, broken. She tossed it back into the hole. The boy gasped. Why'd you do that? Because the ground remembers better than you, she said. The girl shook her head. You're scared of it. The widow looked at her sharp. I'm scared of nothing. I'm tired of everything. They stared down into the hole, the badge half buried again in dirt. The lantern flickered, shadows crawling over the stones of the well. The little one whispered, We don't sleep tonight. The widow sat on the edge of the well, shovel across her knees. No, she said, we don't. The children huddled together, backs against the dirt mound. The night grew colder, crickets fading into silence. The hole gaped before them, dark, waiting. No one closed their eyes. The sound of hooves came first, heavy in the dirt. Then silence. The widow froze by the table, lantern glow flickering across her face. The children crowded at the window, peering through cracks. The sheriff sat his horse, eyes on the house. He swung down slow, boots sinking into dust. His hand dipped into his coat. When it came out, he held a box of matches. The widow's breath caught. Stay back. He crouched by the porch steps, striking one against the box. Flame bloomed small and cruel. He dropped it onto the dry hay piled against the boards. Fire licked fast, climbing eager up the side of the house. The boy shouted, "He's burning us!" The widow grabbed him, pulling him close. "Inside, now!" Smoke curled through the boards, thick and bitter. The children coughed, eyes stinging. The girl pushed against the widow's arm. "We fight, or we burn." The widow gripped their shoulders hard, her voice blunt and cutting. "We don't burn." She shoved them back from the door, dragging quilts from the bed, pressing them against the gaps where smoke bled in. Flames roared outside, the porch crackling under their weight. The boy pointed to the wall, wide-eyed. "It's moving through." The girl grabbed a bucket, slamming water against the boards. Steam hissed, but the fire climbed higher. "It won't stop," she yelled. The widow's eyes blazed. "Then we stop it." She tore the pot from the stove, water sloshing, throwing it across the boards. The fire hissed but clawed back, smoke thickening. The youngest coughed hard, her small body shaking. The widow pulled her close, wrapping her in a quilt, shielding her from the heat. Outside, the sheriff's voice carried, low and steady. "Come out, or burn." The widow's eyes narrowed. "Not today." The girl shouted toward the door, fury in her voice. "We ain't scared of you." The sheriff's laugh cut through the smoke. "Then you're fools." The widow pressed her back against the wall, the heat searing through. Her voice dropped sharp. "No, he is." The boy darted to the window, peeking out. "He's watching, just standing there." "Then let him watch," the widow said. "He'll see what standing looks like." The flames cracked louder, boards groaning, smoke pressing against the ceiling. The girl threw another bucket, her arms trembling. The widow poured water along the floor, soaking quilts, pushing them tight against the walls. The children followed her lead, frantic, quick. The sheriff's boots scraped outside, pacing slow across the porch. Another match struck, another flame tossed against the boards. The widow's voice thundered louder than the fire. "You won't take this house." The girl screamed back. "We don't burn." The children echoed her, voices hoarse but fierce. "We don't burn." The walls shuddered, heat searing, but the water spread, the quilts steaming. The fire slowed, clawing weaker, smoke curling thinner. The boards hissed, glowing, but they held. The sheriff's shadow stretched through the window. He stood still, watching, waiting for collapse. Instead, the flames guttered, choking out against soaked wood. Smoke thinned, drifting into the night. Inside, the children gasped for air, eyes red, faces streaked with soot. The widow stood straight, chest heaving, her hand gripping the shovel she had leaned by the door. Her voice came flat. "He'll try again." The boy coughed, wiping his mouth. "Then we'll fight again." The girl clenched her fists. "He don't win." The youngest buried her face in the widow's skirt, whispering between coughs. "We don't burn." The widow's hand rested on her head, steady. "That's right." The house creaked, walls blackened but still upright. Ash drifted across the floor. Outside, hooves sounded again, fading into the dark. The widow lifted the lantern, its glow shaking across scorched wood. Her voice came quiet, final. "He'll come with more than fire next time." The children looked at her, faces set, smoke still clinging to their skin. None of them spoke. None had to. The house stood, scarred but unbroken. Dawn broke pale and cold. The yard lay still, the grass heavy with dew. The children stepped out first, bare feet sinking into the damp earth. The boy stopped short, eyes fixed upward. A rope hung from the oak by the well, thick, coarse, swaying slow in the morning air. The girl whispered, "It wasn't there last night." The little one clutched her sister's hand. "Who put it there?" The boy's jaw tightened. "He did." The widow stepped onto the porch, face shadowed by the brim of her hat. She followed their eyes, saw the rope swinging. She didn't pause. She walked straight to the tree, pulled a knife from her apron, and with one strike, cut it down. The rope hit the dirt with a heavy thud. The boy glared at her. "What's it for?" She didn't answer. His voice rose. "What's it for?" The girl's whisper cut him off. "It's for us." Silence dropped heavier than the rope itself. The little one whimpered. "I don't want it." "No one does," the widow said at last. The boy kicked at the rope, anger burning in his eyes. "Then why's it here?" The widow bent, picked it up, coiling it slow. Her hands moved steady, her face hard. "Because he wants you to see it." The girl's breath shook. "He wants us scared." The widow's voice came flat. "Then don't give him what he wants." The boy spat into the dirt. "Easy for you." Her eyes snapped sharp. "You think I don't know fear?" The rope coiled tighter in her hands, rough fibers scraping her skin. She walked back toward the house, tossing it onto the porch. It landed heavy, a coil of threat resting by the door. The girl stepped forward, voice sharp. "So that's it? We just ignore it?" The widow faced her, eyes hard. "We live. That's how we answer." The boy shook his head. "Living ain't enough." "Tonight it is," she said. The little one tugged at her sleeve. "Will he come again?" "Yes," the widow said, "but we'll be ready." The children followed her back inside, though their eyes kept drifting to the oak, the empty branch swaying in the pale light. The girl looked back one last time, whispering under her breath, "It was meant for us." The widow heard, though she didn't turn. Her silence carried the weight of truth no words could ease. Inside, the table still bore stains of blood and soot. The children sat close, quiet for once. The widow placed the coil of rope on the counter, where the lantern's glow touched it. She left it in plain sight. The boy scowled. "Why keep it?" "So you remember," she said. "Remember what?" "That fear don't belong to him. It belongs to us now." The girl looked at her sharp. "And what do we do with it?" The widow's voice cut low. "We use it." The room fell still again, the rope lying dark in the corner. Outside, the oak swayed, its branch bare. The children leaned together, their eyes heavy but unblinking, waiting for night to fall again. The moon rose pale and swollen, spilling light across the barn's crooked frame. The widow carried the lantern, its glow small against the night. The children followed, shovels dragging, their feet whispering in the dirt. They stopped by the barn wall, ground damp and dark with age. The widow set the lantern down. "Here." The boy frowned. "Why here?" Her answer was short. "Because this is where it breathes." He gripped the shovel, stabbing it into the soil. The girl joined him, scraping deep, her breath harsh. The little one knelt close, clawing dirt with her bare hands. The widow stood above, watching, silent. The first strike hit something solid. The boy dropped to his knees, pulling free a small shape, a button caked with rust and soil. He held it up. Clothes. The girl dug faster, fingers bleeding against stone. "Keep going." Another strike uncovered a buckle, bent and cracked. She shoved it into her palm, eyes sharp. This was his. The boy glanced up. "Whose?" The widow's silence stretched long. The girl's voice cut through. "Say it." The widow didn't move. The boy slammed the shovel down, dirt spraying. "Tell us." The widow's jaw clenched. At last she spoke, voice flat, final. This land don't forget. The words hung heavy, heavier than the air itself. The children froze, staring at her. The boy whispered, "What did he do?" The widow shook her head. The girl pressed harder, words sharp as knives. "Why here? Why bury him here? Not him," the widow snapped. The girl's breath caught. "Then who?" The widow looked at the ground. Her shadow stretched long across the hole. Her voice came low. "Others." The boy stumbled back. "How many?" Her silence answered. The girl's eyes burned. "You knew. You knew all along." The widow's voice sharpened. "I lived it." The boy's face twisted. "You watched?" "I survived," she said. The girl's words rose sharp. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have," the widow said. The hole widened, dirt spilling out, bones surfacing, splintered, brittle, nameless. The little one whimpered, clutching a fragment in her small hands. "Too many," she whispered. The boy snatched it from her, tossing it back into the pit. "Don't touch it." The widow's hand caught his arm. "Respect them." "Why?" he demanded. "Nobody respected us." Her eyes burned. "Because that's the difference." The girl's voice broke. Half fury, half fear. "And what happens when he finds this?" The widow stared into the pit, the lantern glow catching in her eyes. "He already knows. He just wants you to see it." The boy's fists trembled. "Then why don't we stop him?" Her voice came steady. "Because stopping comes after surviving." The girl shook her head, tears streaking her dirt-stained cheeks. "That ain't enough." "It has to be," the widow said. The silence stretched, filled only by the scrape of dirt sliding back into the pit. The children huddled close, their faces pale, their hands raw. The boy whispered, "We can't sleep here anymore." The widow's eyes stayed fixed on the hole. "We don't sleep anywhere until it's finished." The girl looked at her, voice thin. "Then when?" The widow answered once, and only once. "When the ground takes him too." The pit seemed to swallow the words whole, the weight of the past settling deep into the soil. The children stared down, their breath catching. The widow lifted the lantern, its light trembling across the bones. She turned away, voice rough. "Neither do I." The barn loomed behind them, silent but watching, as if it had always known. The night was still when the sound of boots broke the silence. No horses, no men. Just one set of steps across the dirt. The widow stood in the doorway, lantern in hand, the flame throwing shadows high against the walls. The children gathered behind her, eyes sharp. The sheriff appeared from the dark, rope coiled in one hand, Bible clutched in the other. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. His voice carried low, steady. "They ain't yours?" The widow's grip tightened on the lantern. Her other hand rose slow, deliberate. Firelight caught on the thin gold ring circling her finger. It gleamed bright against the soot and scars. Her voice cut through the night. "Then neither is your silence." The children pressed closer, their bare feet on the boards, shoulders squared. The boy whispered, "Don't let him." The girl hissed, "We stand." The little one's voice shook, but she said it anyway. "We ain't leaving." The sheriff's gaze slid over them, then back to the widow. "They're strays, wild. You can't make 'em yours." The widow's chin lifted. "I already did." He stepped up onto the first porch board, the rope swaying loose in his hand. "You think a ring makes you more than what you are?" Her eyes burned. "It makes me enough." The sheriff's lips curled, but no laugh came. "Enough to fight law." "Enough to fight you," she said. The boy shouted, "You ain't law." The sheriff's eyes snapped to him. "Quiet, boy." The girl stepped forward, voice fierce. "He don't answer to you." The sheriff's gaze shifted back to the widow. "They'll eat you alive. You feed them, they'll turn on you. Wild things always do." The widow's voice came sharp. "Then I'll teach them to be more." The sheriff raised the Bible, opening it slow. His voice echoed like a sermon. "Scripture says the lost don't belong in the house of the living." The widow cut him off. "Scripture don't feed a child." The Bible lowered. His jaw clenched. He lifted the rope, letting it swing heavy in the firelight. "This says otherwise." The widow's eyes flicked to the rope, then back to him. Her voice dropped, calm but hard. "That rope remembers more blood than you do." The children gripped each other tighter. The girl spat toward his boots. "You won't take us." The sheriff's voice cracked, anger rising. "You think you can stop me?" The widow lifted her hand again, the ring catching firelight, burning brighter than his badge ever had. "I already did." The boy stepped beside her, shoulders squared. The girl joined him. The little one moved in close, her small hand clutching the widow's dress. Together they stood, silent, unyielding. The sheriff's face twisted. His fingers squeezed the rope so tight, his knuckles paled. He took one more step up the porch. The boards groaned. The widow's voice thundered, sharper than any blade. "Step higher and see what happens." The sheriff froze. The firelight shook in the lantern, shadows crawling across his face. For a long moment he held her stare, the rope dangling, the Bible trembling in his hand. At last he stepped back. His boots hit dirt. His voice came low, bitter. "You made a mistake." The widow's eyes didn't leave him. "So did you." He turned, walking into the dark, the rope swaying at his side. His shadow disappeared into night. The widow stood still, lantern raised, ring glowing against her hand. The children stayed close, no longer wild, their faces set in the same defiance as hers. The little one whispered, "We ain't scared." The widow's voice came steady. "Good, stay that way." The flame in the lantern flickered, throwing their shadows long across the wall. 4 figures bound not by blood, but by choice. The night around them stayed heavy, but the house stood, scarred and stubborn. It did not end in peace. It ended in defiance. A family forged from ruin, unbroken before the dark. The rope's scrape still echoed in her ears long after the sheriff vanished. She lowered the lantern but didn't let it go out. The glow crawled over the porch boards, showing every scar and crack, every mark left by boots and rain and fire. The children pressed closer. She didn't hush them, didn't comfort them. She only stood tall, her hand heavy around the lantern's handle. "Inside," she said at last. They obeyed without question. The older girl led the younger boy through the door. Their bare feet whispered against the planks. The widow followed, closing the door slow, sliding the bar back into place. The sound was final, heavy as a coffin lid. The outlaw was already at the table. His face was hard, his knuckles split from the fight days before. He didn't look at her first. His eyes stayed on the children. Then he shifted to her. "Well?" he asked. She set the lantern down. "He'll be back." "Alone?" "No." The outlaw nodded once, as if he'd expected nothing else. His gaze dropped to the table's scar, the stain that never washed out. Blood dried dark against the grain, a reminder they couldn't scrape clean. He pressed his palm flat against it. "This is why." The widow pulled her hand from the lantern, flexing her fingers. The ring caught the light. a thin band but heavy in meaning. She looked at the table, too, then at him. "No, this is why." The boy leaned on the doorframe. His voice came small but sharp. Sheriff looked scared. The widow turned to him. "He was." The girl frowned. "But he'll come back anyway." "Yes," the widow said. "Why?" The widow didn't soften her tone. "Because men like him don't stop when they're scared. They stop when they're broken." The outlaw leaned back, arms crossed. "Then we break him." The children's eyes darted between them. The girl whispered, "Will he break us first?" The widow stepped closer, kneeling so her eyes met the girl's. Her voice was blunt. "Not while I stand." The girl nodded once, her jaw set. The boy copied her, his little shoulders squaring though his chin trembled. The widow stood, her body tired but unbent. She looked around the room, the stove hissing, the shadows long, the table scarred, the blood unyielding. "This house don't forgive," she said. The outlaw answered steady, "Neither do we." The night stretched, slow and thick. Wind pressed against the shutters. Boards groaned as if remembering the boots that had struck them. The widow sat at the table, knife in hand, sharpening it against stone. The scrape carried sharp through the silence. The outlaw stayed by the window, one hand on the frame, the other near his belt. The children lay curled on the floor by the fire, their breaths uneven but not yet asleep. The widow didn't look up as she spoke. "He'll come with rope again." The outlaw's eyes stayed outside, and with men. Her hand moved steady across the blade. "Then we give them ground, not rope." He turned, frowning. "You mean graves." She lifted the knife, the edge catching lantern light. "Yes." The boy stirred, murmuring in his sleep. The girl pulled a blanket higher over him, her eyes catching the widow's. She whispered, "How many?" The widow answered without pause, "As many as they bring." The girl's lips pressed tight. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She nodded, then lay back down, her hand still over her brother's shoulder. The outlaw watched. His jaw tightened, but his voice came softer than before. "You're raising them into this." The widow's eyes flicked to him, sharp. Better this than silence. He looked away first. The fire popped, sparks skittering against iron. The widow set the knife down, the stone beside it. She pressed her hands against the table, leaning forward. The ring glinted, the blood-stained dark beneath her palm. "We stand here," she said. "Not behind law, not behind rope. Here." The outlaw stepped back from the window, shadows wrapping around him. "And if the house burns?" "Then we stand in the ashes," she replied. The words filled the room like a vow. The children stirred but didn't speak. The outlaw didn't argue. When morning came, it brought no peace. The sun rose pale. The sky washed thin. The widow stepped onto the porch, her skirts brushing the boards, still blackened from fire weeks before. She scanned the yard. The well sat heavy, its rope coiled neat, the grave fresh beside it. The tree still leaned near the fence line, its branches bare where a rope once swung. The outlaw joined her, hat pulled low. "Quiet, too quiet," she said. They stood side by side, watching the horizon. No riders, no dust, but the air felt heavy, as if men crouched just beyond sight, waiting for the moment to break. The widow lifted her hand to shade her eyes. The ring caught the sunlight, flashing sharp. "Let them see it," she murmured. The outlaw's voice came low. "They already do." She lowered her hand, turned back into the house. The children were at the table, bread torn in their hands, eating in silence. Their eyes followed her every step, but they didn't speak. She sat with them, tore her own piece, chewed, swallowed. The outlaw leaned against the wall. watching all three of them. The widow broke the silence. "Say it." The children looked confused. "Say it," she repeated. The girl spoke first, hesitant. "Thank you." The widow shook her head. "Not that." The boy frowned. "Then what?" She looked at both of them, her voice steady. "Say we ain't scared." The girl swallowed, then said it. "We ain't scared." The boy echoed her, louder. "We ain't scared." The widow nodded once. "Good." The outlaw's eyes softened, but he said nothing. That night the sheriff didn't come, nor the next. Days passed in silence, each one heavier than the last. Every creak in the floor, every knock of wind against the shutters made the children sit straighter, made the widow's hand drift to the knife, made the outlaw glance toward the door. But no men came. Not yet. On the fifth night, the widow rose from her chair, crossed to the door, and opened it wide. The yard lay still under moonlight. She stepped out, barefoot on the boards. The outlaw followed, though slower. The children stayed inside, watching from the window. She looked at the well, at the grave, at the tree. Her voice carried low but clear. "This land don't forgive." The outlaw stepped beside her. "Neither do we." She turned her head, meeting his eyes. Then it settled. He nodded once. They stood in the moonlight, the house behind them, the land before them, the shadows heavy but theirs. The children pressed their hands against the glass, faces pale but eyes unyielding. And when the night closed in again, when the silence grew thick enough to choke, they didn't bow. They stood. The house bore its scars, the blackened porch, the blood-stained table, the grave beside the well, but it bore them as proof. Proof that it had not broken. Proof that those inside had not been bent by rope or silence. The sheriff would return. His men would come. The land would press harder, demand more. But the widow, the outlaw, and the children had already chosen. They would not be erased. It did not end in peace. It ended in defiance, a family forged from ruin, unbroken before the dark. The night broke slow, like it didn't want to end. The widow sat at the table, the lantern burning low, shadows stretching long across the scarred wood. The children slept near the hearth, curled in blankets that still smelled of smoke. The outlaw leaned against the doorframe, hat tipped low, but his eyes didn't close. When the lantern sputtered, the widow reached to trim the wick. The outlaw's voice came quiet, rough. "He won't wait long." Her hand stilled. "Neither will we." "You mean to kill him?" She looked at him hard. "I mean to outlive him." The outlaw straightened, arms crossed. "Outliving ain't the same as winning." Her voice stayed flat. "It's the only win that counts." The outlaw said nothing more. The lantern hissed, then steadied. Morning brought gray light through the cracks. The children woke hungry, tearing at bread with small, sharp teeth. The girl chewed fast, then slowed, eyes darting to the window. "He's watching," she whispered. The boy shook his head. "Ain't no one there." "Don't matter," the widow said. "We live like he is." The little one sipped water, eyes wide. "Even when he's not." "Especially then," the widow answered. The outlaw moved to the window, scanning the yard. His jaw tightened. "Quiet out there." "Too quiet," the widow said. The children glanced between them, their hands pausing over the bread. The girl set hers down. "What do we do till he comes?" The widow leaned forward, palms flat on the table. The ring on her finger caught the morning light, flashing sharp. "We get ready." The boy frowned. "How?" She met his eyes. "By not forgetting." The day dragged slow. The widow worked with her hands, mending torn cloth. sharpening the knife, hauling water from the well. The children followed her, silent at first, then whispering to each other, then louder, their voices chasing away some of the weight. The outlaw chopped wood near the barn, each strike of the axe echoing like a gunshot. By noon, the girl leaned against the porch rail, sweat streaking her face. She looked at the widow. "Why don't we run?" The widow set down the bucket, water sloshing over the rim. "Because running means he's already won. But if we leave, he'll follow," the outlaw said from the yard. He swung the axe again, wood splitting clean. "Better to make him come here. At least then the ground's ours." The boy frowned. "But the ground's his too." The widow shook her head. "Not anymore." The girl studied her, suspicion in her eyes. "You sound sure." "I am," the widow said. The girl didn't argue. She just sat quiet, watching the horizon. That night, the storm came. Wind howled through the trees, rattling the shutters, slamming branches against the roof. The children pressed close to the hearth, blankets pulled high. The outlaw paced by the window, one hand on the shutter latch, the other on his belt. The widow sat in her chair, eyes fixed on the rope coiled on the counter. It hadn't moved, but it felt alive, like it breathed with the storm. She rose, crossed the room, and picked it up. The fibers scratched her skin. She held it out to the children. "Look at it." The girl frowned. "Why?" "Because this is what he wants," the widow said, "and this is what he won't get." The boy scowled. "Then burn it." "Not yet," she said. The little one's voice cracked. "It scares me." "Good," the widow said. "Fear keeps you awake." The girl glared. "You teaching us to be scared?" "No," the widow said. "I'm teaching you not to lie about it." She coiled the rope tighter, set it back on the counter, and turned away. The storm rattled the walls, but inside the house, silence held stronger. When the storm passed, the air smelled of wet earth and smoke that never fully left. The children sat on the porch, their feet dangling over the edge, eyes scanning the yard. The boy picked up a stick, carving lines into the dirt. "He'll come again," he said. "Yes," the girl answered. The little one leaned against her, whispering, "And if he don't?" The widow stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her voice carried flat, final. "He will. Men like him always do." The outlaw leaned on the post, hat low. "Then we make ready." The widow nodded. "And we don't bend." The children looked at her, then at each other. The girl clenched her fists. The boy nodded. The little one whispered one more time, "We ain't scared." The widow's eyes softened, just for a breath. "Good," she said. The house held its scars, the porch blackened by fire, the table marked with blood, the grave by the well, the rope coiled tight on the counter. Every mark a memory, every memory a warning. The widow sat at the table that night, knife in hand, sharpening it slow. The outlaw stood by the door, watching the dark outside. The children curled close to the fire, their small voices whispering, almost chanting. "We ain't scared." The widow looked at them, her face unreadable. Then she turned back to the knife, the ring on her finger catching the firelight. Her voice came low, steady, carrying through the room. "This house don't forgive." The outlaw answered, as always, "Neither do we." And with that, the silence settled, not as fear, but as a vow. They would wait, they would endure, and when the sheriff came again, they would not burn, and they would not bow. It would not end in peace, it would end in defiance, again, always.